2.
Oh, good.
Sorry, I flew right up here because I thought you'd be waiting for me.
Do we know if we started yet?
I think Facebook may have started, but I think we're ready, Teresa, for YouTube.
Yeah. Are we on?
I think so.
Okay, great. 6 months later, still no theme song. But it's between 2 services. And it's the final one before we take a break for the summer. Got a lot of things going on this summer. We're gonna celebrate the 175th anniversary. Gonna have a wonderful church picnic and an evensong. And then I'm taking some time to rest. Kind of dead this morning. It's been crazy.
I understand.
And then we look to bring this program back in some form or fashion, still playing around with our digital ministries and what that's going to mean. But we've learned a lot over the last couple of years, and I thought that it would be a good idea for us to kind of close out just by talking about virtual ministry, where we've been, where we're going. I'm particularly excited, Owen, about your project called Organ Explorer, because if you guys haven't checked it out, please do. And it's one of the things that you're having a lot of organic success at that, because our numbers here for our digital ministry are good, right? They're good in that, this program will probably be viewed by 40 or 50 people, which if we thought about it in the context of, a Sunday morning rector's forum or adult Sunday school class would be fantastic. Mm-hmm. But you're popping thousands of views from these Organ Explorer videos. And so obviously you've caught the attention of an audience, and I think it'd be good for us to hear how that idea gets started, what the steps towards implementation are, and frankly, how are you being so dang successful?
Well, it's a multi-pronged question. But first, let me just say, so for those of you who don't know, if you just type in on YouTube 2 words Organ Explorer, and it's all there for you, or you can type in my name, Owen Sammons, and it usually directs you. But ultimately, the project got started because we had. I don't want to say an excess. We have ample supplies here to do things, and I wanted to just see. We have a lot of video equipment here at St. John's, and I've been collecting a lot of audio equipment at home. And some of our recordings from our early live streams, the audio I was really quite impressed with, especially how it captured the organ. And I thought, I wonder if I can take this on the road a little bit. And so I contacted a few friends of mine. And that's really, it was just very low key. And I said, I would like to start something. And if you look online, there's another person who does something similar. His name is Brent Johnson, and he is the founder of the Organ Media Foundation. And it's a nonprofit, and they have some pretty clear-cut goals and quotas, and I assume they have a lot of people who go on the road with them. So they're doing a little bit more than I can possibly chew at this point, or biting off more than I can chew. But in terms of what I can bring to the table, I just thought, there are especially some organs around that would be fun to document. So I just packed everything in my car, and whoever would have me for the first couple of episodes. And so the first prong of this is our own digital ministry and how it kind of plays in at St. John's. And I would say one interesting thing about going to these churches, apart from hearing the organs, is every church is adapted to some type of digital ministry. And I don't want to be comparative, right, because you can go see all the churches I've been to. But I would say that I think St. John's has adapted particularly well. Okay. There have been several churches where the aesthetic of the room has completely changed. And it's one thing. It's one thing when you can't see when things change. And in St. John's, a lot we've updated a lot of stuff, and it's just up there. It's not something you constantly have to think about. And in many churches, it's out there. You see it. If you're watching the stream, you don't see it, but if you're in the room, you see it. And one particular historic church had a lot of things mounted behind things. So it looked from straight on, it looks fine. But then when you're at an angle, so I think we've handled that pretty well. But it is really fun, or enlightening more than fun, to see how everyone has dealt with the pandemic and going digital. And that kind of leads to the next part about getting people to do this, getting organists on board. And I think organists right now are a little jaded because they've been recording themselves playing for all of the pandemic. And then I come in and say, I want to record more. And
we're like, hey.
Yeah. And some of them, they're screen ready. They've been doing this and some of them are, like, I loathe this process. And so, I try to make our filmings extremely low-key, personable. And at times I think we've had great conversations, and I thought, I don't know how much of that I have on video. Some of the best stuff I walk away with just in the back of my head, not on video. And so that's always a risk, is to be too chatty when the camera's not rolling. But yeah, in terms of growth, what's so strange about it, I think part of it is YouTube's magic. So I've been noticing on analytics. So this is a little shop talk of how YouTube works. Is on their analytics of things, you can see how people are being routed to your content. And my content was coming primarily, what started from Facebook, because I kept posting it on Facebook. And then there was just a little explosion. And I think YouTube's algorithm says, oh, there's something happening here, I'm going to push it out more. And then it pushes. And then you start to see that the people coming to you are coming from YouTube recommendations. And then they're coming from posts or reposts of the video that was recommended to somebody else or something like that. And so I think that there's a threshold of, like, you have to light a match. And I think once that match gets lit, YouTube does something. But then I think after the match is lit, you really have to be regular. And that's what we have at St. John's really well. And that's what I don't do that well, because these videos are, they're very time consuming to edit and make. Although I thoroughly love doing it. But it's hard to be consistent and so that the format right now is, when I get an invite or when I invite myself and someone says, that's fine, come on, I go, film, edit, push it out as quick as I can, because I want to get kind of a set, I want to get a season down, more or less. And my hope is next season, or at least when this season ends, to go ahead and record all of them up front, edit them, and then publish them week after week in a 10-week series. And that way YouTube will be like, oh, you're doing something weekly. And then I think the algorithm will quickly be like, oh, push this out.
All this stuff.
That's my take on it. Now, and that's the other thing, is when you look at the analytics, you can read whatever you want from YouTube's analytics, because it facilitates endorphins. It makes you feel good to read the analytics, and it's hard sometimes to parse through, like, what do I need to do? It's like, well, this is what's happening. And even then, I'm not totally sure. I get some comments that seem like good comments, and then I get some that say just the opposite. And it's just like, okay, well, all right.
Right. There's like diversity in response.
Like, that's a good comment too. I think I'll keep it the same for now. But well, yeah, and honestly, I think, yeah, the subject matter is interesting, but I feel like part of how YouTube works is pushing it out. So I don't want to take all the credit, but also fabulous organists all over are really. I've been so impressed with the caliber of organ playing. And every time I go somewhere and have these experiences, it's just, I think, I want to do a service with this person, or with this, or bring these people bring these people to St. John's so they can play the organ and I can conduct the choir. But no, and that's nice.
Can I just stop right there because I want to make a good point, because I think that's an excellent point that we need to make is that like the whole purpose of the digital ministry that we're doing is also to facilitate in-person, real-life connections and ministry. It's not just, I think the goal of all of this isn't to push everything into the digital realm so that we're not interacting as people, but rather the experience in the pandemic when we had to have that distance, that really prompted us to go into digital ministry. But now this opens up doors for all kinds of collaboration.
It does, yeah, it really does. And on another level, with visiting these churches and talking about this, there's this shared, especially among organists, of like, oh, digital ministry is so perplexing. The name of it is it's like that's not what my diploma is in or what my skills set is. But the reality is that if it's implemented well, it just becomes a part of the fabric and engages new people and I'm really grateful for the people that it's engaged here at St. John's. Because they're able to serve in a way that they wouldn't normally, and that's really nice. But on the musical side of it, I was telling my colleagues that it gives me an excellent archive of what we've done and how. I think one of the things here at St. John's for the musician especially, and why collaboration is so nice, is that the way the church is set up, the musician is kind of supposed to be in several different places at once and lead the choir from behind the choir, which is, it's challenging. And so
behind the choir, facing a different direction.
And then you have to know what it sounds like at the same time. So the digital ministry has enabled me as a musician to go back and say, oh, that's what I wasn't hearing, or I need to assign somebody to or something like that. And then talking about this with other musicians it's a shared thing and we're all kind of mutually glad that it exists. But I will say another thing that really helps is, we're not wholly out of the woods yet. People are still getting sick and have to stay home. And that's the thing. When you're in the zone in church, for lack of better words, when you're pretty consistent and church and the Eucharist and what we do here becomes part of the fabric of your life, missing it one Sunday is really jarring. Yeah. It's really jarring as a musician to miss like the service music and stuff like that. And so if I'm not here for a Sunday, I will almost definitely watch our stream or 4 or 5 others. There's an Anglo-Catholic church in I think it's in DC that I watch all the time. But it's like I feel that there's real merit to that, and it keeps people, even if they can't be here, it keeps them in that same zone. If not, of course, it keeps them engaged with St. John's or your own parish, but keeps you engaged with the Eucharist and all of that as well. So I'm glad about that.
Well, I love this idea, and this might be something that that we need to think about strategically, because we do have this wonderful archive of things that we've done.
Yeah.
And I think about with the Organ Explorer video how earlier in the pandemic you did a really fantastic organ crawl.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like the proto example of this project.
It is, yeah.
And we still have that. And maybe if my brain's functioning in an hour or two, I'll email that out to the parish just to remind people, hey, watch these explorations of these other organs, but really remember that like our organ kind of was.
It was the first one, yeah.
It was the first one, and
well, that one took a lot more time and effort. It should be mentioned.
You're right. You're going through all these steps.
Well, the one here, just for good measure, I actually digitally modeled the whole instrument in Google SketchUp, which is a really fun.
You don't do that for every organ.
Yeah, I wish. If I had the time and the staff and the money. But no, I modeled the whole organ, and I cut some corners here and there, but it allows you to go through and just see what's going on inside the case. And I think so frequently we see these organs and we think, they're again part of the fabric of whatever's going on. But what sits just behind it is sometimes in a sad state. Not here. We're not quite in a sad state at St. John's, although it's an older, aging American tracker organ that has some things coming up. But I think that's one of my biggest goals of Organ Explorer, is to say the facade, and that's what it's called on these organs, is the facade pipes. And it's like, that's such a great word, because it's really a false front sometimes for all the busyness. And sometimes it's in immaculate shape, and you can see their Organ Explorers where every inch is lit and you can access every pipe, and it's like, oh, this is so nice. It's just an abundance of room. And then the one here at St. John's, there's so many shadows, and there are lights in the organ itself, and they just cast shadows onto other pipes, so you can see some but not others. And then to get inside it, oh my gosh, I can't. I just can't. I'm too large. I have too much mass.
To, be Ant-Man, right?
You do.
Shrink down.
Well, and I saw somebody get up in there, and he was tall, but he was probably my height and no more than like 150, 160 pounds. So extremely thin. And I was impressed, but even he had a hard time. And I just thought, so that's one of the things that bears mentioning, is back in early American organ building in the turn of the century, they did not care if you could fit inside these instruments. It was not a concern. I think so many times it was, you had a budget, and fill that budget. Like whatever you can cram into that organ, cram it in. If you can't tune it, get yourself a pole long enough that will reach something on it that will tune it. And on ours, well, it's interesting. It has an interesting effect. There are some pipes that are just never really in tune. But as far as getting somebody in it, it has to be a really slim individual. But, other than that, the newer ones are almost always really nicely laid out, and they're always easy to get to things because, organ builders are much less than there were before, or turn of the century especially, and people who really want to dig into them and get inside and get dirty with them are fewer as well. So, and me being one of them, we need to have more space.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, and I think it's fascinating. I think where organs are placed is fascinating. I think where the organist is, because as a priest or a pastor, you generally know where you are, right? Like you're generally up front. There's usually a place to speak from. There might be two. There's a table. There's an altar. There could be both. But you have an idea of where you're going to be.
Right.
Where I've seen in going around with churches, I've served a church where the organist was in the balcony,
right?
Completely out of the way, away from everybody. And then I remember when we went to, when I was on vacation, going to the Mormon tabernacle, and that organist is in the center of it all, front and center, playing, and that's kind of the range of what I've seen is the organist can be front and center, one of the main pieces of the action, or tucked away in a corner in a balcony, and everywhere in between.
And it's really, it's such a gamble too, as to what that's going to do for the job of the organist. Like for instance, here at St. John's, and you'll see in how the organ is made has a lot to do with that. If it's an organ that has an electric action, usually the console can be placed in different places, and even then they place them in weird places. But if it's a direct action, a tracker action like ours is, the console's almost always attached to the case itself. And so in the United States, it makes for organists who are almost always facing away from the action, that have to rely on mirrors. Or in Europe, a lot of times you have organists who are really far away from the action because the organ is usually tucked up kind of high. That's an American thing too. In Britain, you have the choirs down here, and then the organist is tucked up somewhere on the third level up, and they are using screens, and that just drives me nuts. And in those churches, you almost always have two people. The organist has one job, and it's really to follow. And then the choir master's job is to make sure everything works together. So when you have to do both and you have a tracker that's tucked away in another room, that's the other thing, is that in a lot of times when they put in tracker organs, they'll put them right in the middle of the room so that the organist, even if they're facing away, can still be seen, or, like have some type of communication. And ours is not. God bless St. John's. But no, it's in a room of its own, so that adds, it makes it complicated. But the most interesting one, I think, is the one I just recorded. Well, not just recorded, but the one that just came out in Berea, Kentucky, Union Church. When you walk in, the very first thing you see, the organ is the backdrop of the liturgical hardware. It right in the middle is a Zimbelstern, so the star that well, ours doesn't have a star, but the bells that tinkle that I use all the time, theirs has a star right in the middle, and it actually turns with the Zimbelstern, and it's a big deal that the star needs to land straight. And I've seen this before in other churches, and usually the star is just a multi-pointed star, and all it has to do is land to where there are points that go up and down, and it doesn't have to be square. This one is a 4-pointed star. Well, it's actually 8, but there are 4 points that are really well defined, and so if it doesn't land on one of those 4 points, it looks really off. And the organist told me he always fixes it if it doesn't. And that's just one of those, typically, it's just weird to think of the organ being such a focal piece of the room.
Right.
And whenever I see that, especially with modern organs where the organ is the focal piece, it can be done really well, or it can be done poorly. At Berea, it's done extremely well. At Maxwell Street, where I just visited, it's done extremely well. It's the actual case is in the shape of a dove descending. It's really cool. And it's, those are really neat. But then there are some where the organ is just so present. I haven't really dealt with that yet, but I've seen pictures of them. And so, and sometimes when the organ is in the back of the room, sometimes when the organ is extremely visually interesting, it almost serves better in the back, so that you're not kind of drawn to it during the Eucharist or something like that. I don't know, it plays an interesting role in different churches, but that's one of the things that fascinates me, like organ placement, and I think it's worth mentioning that the organs I have tried to engage so far have all generally been placed well. There are some and there are plenty of those here, especially in central Kentucky, that aren't necessarily placed well, and I don't know, I tend to avoid them in terms of recording them, because it's hard to record. It's hard to record an organ that isn't placed very well in the room, even if the room is good. But if the room is kind of dry and the organ is placed well, that, to me, gets a better recording. But ultimately, the best is if you have a really lively room and a really articulate organ, and then the end goal, it's almost always nice. But, sorry, there are a lot of shop words there too, articulate and all that. And when you get into organ histories, there's just so much. And I can't even begin to go into that on Organ Explorer, because it goes back into the days when a lot of small towns, especially in Europe, did not have orchestras, and so these organs were built to play Wagner and Beethoven and things like that, to bring the orchestral music into these small towns. And then the orchestras, there was a boom of symphony orchestras, and then those kind of organs, their time was more or less over for that purpose. And that's just one example, like our organ has a very set purpose of accompanying singing, and that it does and will do for its entire life, and that purpose that doesn't dissipate for ours. But sometimes organs are built to have a particular sound or particular, those needs dissipate or they become larger, things like that. And so another kind of thing among organs, especially in central Kentucky, are, and I haven't really visited any of these, are where they don't really sing as much as organs, as just kind of lay music under things. and those are, I mean, those are, they can be pretty organs, but at the same time, there's not much you can do with them in terms of presenting the organ as its own, or trying to play repertoire on it or something like that. So I have to kind of navigate around those, but generally, there's some really neat organs in the area, ours being one of them. So yeah.
So there's so much, like, I have enjoyed listening to you and talking and seeing the passion. And I think, and thank you for sharing this with the parish. When we first were conceiving the Cloud of Witnesses and putting in a digital ministry center and buying this equipment, one of the things that we really did focus on was that we didn't just want to be able to stream our services. Like that was sort of, that was goal A, but there were other goals. And one of them was about getting equipment that could then be shared, that could then facilitate passion projects. Because if you're watching Owen at this point, you can see the passion that he's bringing to this project, and this ministry that he's doing. And really, I mean, that's always been my hope, that other people will step forward and say, I'm really interested in this, and could I try to make a video about that? Could we digitalize this, and get it out to a wider audience? And the fact that we've made the investment in those tools here at St. John's, I think, is so important. And as I've said in the beginning, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but not totally, right? We have these toys, let's play with them. And if you watch, I do encourage you to watch. You can see, like, Owen is doing some fantastic things. Other great things are happening. I think Godly Play really worked well this spring, and had a lot of good leaders who kept it organized and going. And there are any number of other things that are possible. So if you have a passion project, or if you know someone else in the wider church who has a passion project and needs some equipment or some tools or some help, or just a listening ear, please refer them to us, because we want to do digital ministry as a capacity building tool, so that our quote unquote small parish can have an even bigger impact in the wider world. And all of this facilitates in-person relationship, new collaborations, new ideas, in addition to touching and blessing other lives. So who knew,
I had no idea.
More than 2 years ago, it's we got to shut down. We have no idea what we're going to do. And, the number of just absolute kind of workaround solutions, the fact that for 2 years we had cable ran around our building because we couldn't get the internet to we've come so far.
This touches back to that hiding the cables conversation that we had earlier. But yeah, and it's worth noting that if you walk around St. John's now, you see a few things. Like if you came into this room, we're obviously in a little studio area, but it's tucked away pretty well, and much better than some, I would say. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Owen. We appreciate
my pleasure.
Your leadership. Please check out his videos and think and dream. I want to do a lot more in-person ministry this fall, but I'm also just really curious about what new avenues God is opening up for us to do neat and creative things. So.
Awesome. Organ Explorer on YouTube.
Good morning, everyone, and we'll see you in about 3 months.